I couldn't stop thinking about that day. Every detail replayed in my mind, every word she had twisted, every smirk she had worn as if she were victorious. At first, I felt raw anger, like a fire consuming me from the inside. But soon, that fire turned cold. It sharpened into something precise, something that could be wielded without losing control. I realized the power wasn't in shouting, in crying, or in letting the world see my pain. The power was in patience, in strategy, in letting her believe she had the upper hand until the moment came when she wouldn't. I started paying attention to the small things. How she walked into a room, confident but unaware of subtle reactions from others. The way she bragged about things she thought were secret. The way people deferred to her sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of admiration. And I noticed her patterns, little habits, small vanities, the things she overlooked because she assumed no one cared enough to notice. I collected them quietly, letting them settle in my mind like pieces of a puzzle that I would assemble into something complete. Some nights, I would lie awake thinking about her. Not with hate, well, maybe a little, but with clarity. I imagined the moment when everything she thought she had achieved would collapse. I imagined her confusion, her disbelief, the way her smug smile would falter when confronted with the truth. I pictured it so vividly that it almost felt real, and that made me both nervous and exhilarated. I started living differently, too. I became calmer in conversations, sharper in my observations, more deliberate with every word I spoke. People began to notice a change in me, though they couldn't put their finger on it. I was no longer reactive. I was intentional. Every gesture, every smile, every comment became part of a greater plan I hadn't even fully revealed to myself yet. And in a strange way, that control gave me peace. Then came the day I knew it was time to act. Not out of impulse, not out of revenge for revenge's sake, but out of necessity. She had been showing off again, laughing at the chaos she thought she had caused, celebrating her little victories as if she had finally won something meaningful. She didn't see that her world was fragile, that it was built on assumptions and lies. I had the knowledge she didn't, the perspective she lacked, and that was where my advantage lay. I approached her casually, the kind of smile that concealed everything. She didn't suspect anything. People often underestimate the quiet ones, the ones who appear unaffected, the ones who watch instead of acting. She laughed at my jokes, shared in my conversations, unaware that every word she spoke, every gesture she made, was catalogued, remembered, and analyzed. I let her believe we were just as we had always been. That was part of the elegance, letting her live in ignorance until the truth could strike without warning. I remember the moment I decided on the exact approach. It wasn't about confrontation, it wasn't about embarrassment. It was about revealing the truth in a way she couldn't ignore, couldn't twist, couldn't escape. I thought about her pride, her insecurities, her belief that she was untouchable. And I realized that the most powerful response wasn't dramatic yelling, or exposure in public, or revenge through humiliation. It was subtle, undeniable, elegant. It was something that would make her question everything she thought she knew, without me having to raise my voice once. There were nights when I doubted myself. Was I overthinking? Was this too much? But then I remembered the look on her face the day she betrayed me, the casual cruelty in her tone, the smug satisfaction that made my blood boil. That memory was enough to keep me focused, enough to remind me that this wasn't about anger, it was about justice. Not the kind that law or rules could enforce, but the kind that comes from being seen, being heard, and being understood. The kind that makes someone realize the impact of their choices. Every step I took, every interaction I orchestrated, was calculated. I didn't have to confront her immediately. I didn't need dramatic gestures. The truth has a way of surfacing on its own when it's inevitable, and I made it inevitable. I watched her continue her routines, her little manipulations, her whispered triumphs, all while knowing that each of them was a thread I could pull to unravel the illusion she had built. And then came the moment that changed everything. It was quiet at first, almost imperceptible, but I felt it, the shift, the tension in the air, the way people's reactions began to mirror the truth I had been waiting to reveal. I didn't rush. I let it grow, let it build, letting her confidence slowly crumble under the weight of the reality she refused to see. Watching her start to notice, to hesitate, to question herself, it was intoxicating in a way I had never expected. Revenge, I realized, isn't about satisfaction in the moment. It's about creating an awakening. It's about letting someone see themselves as the world sees them, without filters, without excuses. It's about patience, observation, and timing. And when done right, it doesn't just stun them, it teaches them, in a way no anger or argument ever could. I could feel her confusion growing, the tiny cracks appearing in her carefully constructed armor. And with each small reaction, each falter, I felt a quiet triumph, the kind that doesn't scream but resonates deeply. I wasn't celebrating cruelty. I was witnessing clarity. I was watching someone finally see the consequences of their actions, without my having to force the moment. By then, I understood something essential. Revenge isn't about being better than someone else. It's about being better than the person you were before the betrayal. And in that understanding, I found something more valuable than victory. I found a sense of control over my own story, a way to reclaim my dignity without losing myself to bitterness. It started with small, almost imperceptible shifts. A glance from someone she had trusted, a hesitation in her voice when she thought no one was listening, the subtle way her smile no longer felt entirely natural. I didn't need to push or prod. I just let her patterns do the work for me. Life has a way of revealing truths to those who ignore them, and I made sure she couldn't hide from it anymore. I remember the moment it truly began to hit her. We were in a group, people chatting and laughing, and she tried to tell a story that painted her in control, untouchable, clever. But the room responded differently this time. People's expressions shifted, subtle but unmistakable, their amusement tinged with recognition. The words she had used to manipulate, the gossip she had spread so carelessly, they were no longer hers to control. They reflected back, showing the cracks in the image she had built. Her confidence faltered. I could see it in the slight twitch of her hand, the way her eyes darted around, searching for reassurance that wasn't there. For a moment, I almost felt pity, but I reminded myself that this wasn't about cruelty. It was about truth. The truth she had ignored, the reality she had twisted, the consequences she had refused to consider. Watching her confront that reality was nothing short of mesmerizing. I stayed calm, letting her unravel while I remained composed. Every laugh she had stolen, every secret she had misused, every moment of humiliation she had caused me, I let it build silently in the room until the weight of it became unavoidable. There was no shouting, no confrontation, just the quiet inevitability of truth landing where it could no longer be denied. And then she turned to me. That's when it hit me, the mix of disbelief, fear, and something else, something softer, almost regret. Her eyes searched mine, trying to understand how I could stand there, unshaken, unaffected. But I wasn't unaffected. I was elevated. I had passed through anger, through pain, through the desire for immediate retaliation, and emerged with clarity. I had become something she couldn't anticipate, something she couldn't manipulate, someone who had observed, calculated, and executed with precision. Her realization wasn't immediate. It crept in, subtle and suffocating, like a shadow stretching across her carefully maintained facade. She started questioning herself, her choices, the stories she had told, the assumptions she had made about how the world worked. And every question she asked herself, every flicker of doubt, was a victory I didn't need to claim. The truth had done it for me. I could see her trying to salvage her composure, to play it off as though nothing had changed, but it was too late. She had glimpsed the consequences of her own actions reflected in the world she thought she controlled. She had underestimated the quiet, the patient, the calculated. And that underestimation was her undoing. As the moments stretched, I felt something unexpected. Satisfaction, yes, but more than that, relief. Relief that I hadn't lost myself in anger, relief that I hadn't stooped to petty retaliation, relief that I could reclaim my story without becoming someone I wouldn't recognize. In her confusion, I saw not just the result of her betrayal, but the reflection of my own strength. People around us began to notice the shift. Friends, colleagues, acquaintances, they sensed the tension, the sudden imbalance, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. She could no longer command the narrative. She could only react to it. And for the first time, she wasn't the one in control. That power, the control she had wielded so carelessly, had quietly and elegantly slipped from her grasp. I watched her, noting every detail, every falter, every attempt to reclaim what she had lost. And yet, I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The elegance of the moment lay in its inevitability, in the quiet precision of cause and effect. She had sown deception and cruelty, and now, without drama or force, she was facing the reflection of her actions. And in that moment, I realized the final lesson. Revenge is not about vengeance. It's about revelation. It's about patience, observation, and timing. It's about understanding that true power lies not in anger, but in clarity. When someone realizes the impact of their actions, when they see the truth they ignored, that moment, quiet, undeniable, and utterly transformative, is more potent than any shouting match or public humiliation could ever be. I felt her searching for answers in my eyes, a silent plea I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. She had been shown. She had felt. She had understood, whether she wanted to admit it or not. And in that understanding, the cycle of betrayal, of power, of control, was broken. She could no longer hurt me, not because I had retaliated, but because I had reclaimed myself, my dignity, and my narrative. As the day ended, I walked away with a sense of calm I hadn't known in weeks. She stayed behind, grappling with what had just unfolded, and I allowed her to. It was her story now, to reckon with in her own way, and I didn't need to intervene. The elegance of truth had done what anger never could. By the time she fully realized what had happened, the room had changed. The air itself felt different, heavier, charged with the weight of truth she could no longer escape. Her usual poise was gone, replaced by hesitation, uncertainty, and that quiet, unbearable realization that her carefully constructed world had cracked. I watched her struggle for control, for words, for some way to reclaim the image she had so recklessly projected, but there was nothing left to grasp. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability there. Not the vulnerability she had shown in small, fleeting moments when she wanted sympathy or attention, but the kind that comes when someone is forced to confront the reality of their actions. Her eyes searched mine as if hoping I would explain it away, hoping I would reassure her that it was all a misunderstanding, but I said nothing. I didn't need to. The truth spoke louder than any words I could offer. It was in that silence that she finally understood. The realization hit her slowly at first, a creeping awareness that left no room for denial. And then, like a wave breaking, it washed over her. Every lie she had told, every secret she had twisted, every smug moment she had enjoyed at my expense, it all came rushing back. And with it, a weight she could no longer ignore. I didn't rejoice in her pain. I didn't laugh or mock. That would have been petty, and I had already left that person behind. What I felt instead was something far more powerful: clarity. I had taken the betrayal, the hurt, and the injustice, and turned it into something unassailable. I had shown her, without raising my voice or compromising my integrity, that actions have consequences, and that the truth, no matter how long it waits, always finds its way to the surface. She tried to speak, to explain, to justify herself, but the words faltered. There was nothing she could say that would change what had already been seen, what had already been felt. And in that moment, I realized the final power of patience and precision. Revenge, real revenge, isn't about hurting someone. It's about revealing them. It's about creating a moment so undeniable, so unavoidable, that they must confront themselves. I turned away, letting her grapple with the weight of her own choices. I didn't need to watch. I had already seen everything I needed to see. And as I walked, I felt lighter than I had in weeks, as if a burden I hadn't fully recognized had finally lifted. The anger, the hurt, the sting of betrayal, they were all still there, yes, but transformed into something that no longer had the power to control me. The aftermath wasn't dramatic in the way I had imagined when I first began planning. There were no grand confrontations, no explosive revelations shouted across rooms. There were only subtle changes, shifts in perception, the quiet ripple of truth moving through the lives of those around us. And in that ripple, I found my victory. Not the kind that demands attention or applause, but the kind that leaves a mark where it counts, in the conscience, in the understanding, in the undeniable reality of what had been done. I thought about her after that day, often, in quiet moments. Not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with reflection. I thought about the choices that had brought her to that moment, the arrogance that had blinded her, and the fragility that lay beneath the surface of her confidence. And I thought about myself, about how betrayal had forced me to grow, to observe, to become deliberate, and ultimately to reclaim my power in a way I had never imagined I could. There's a strange satisfaction in knowing that justice doesn't always have to be loud or vengeful. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's simply existing in your own truth while the other person is left to confront theirs. That day, I realized that the deepest power lies not in punishing others, but in mastering yourself, in choosing how you respond, and in letting integrity do what anger never could. Life, I learned, has a way of testing us in ways we never expect. It teaches us about trust, about patience, and about resilience. But most of all, it teaches us about clarity, the ability to see someone for who they truly are and to act in a way that reflects not our hurt, but our strength. And as I look back, I understand something I didn't at first. Betrayal, as painful as it is, has a way of revealing not just the weaknesses of others, but the power within ourselves. By the time the dust settled, she had changed too, not in the way I intended, but inevitably. She had to face the consequences of her actions, to live with the realization that the world is rarely as pliable as she believed. And I had changed as well, not hardened, not cruel, but awakened, intentional, and unshakable. Walking away that day, I carried more than relief. I carried wisdom. I carried the knowledge that true strength isn't found in retaliation, but in patience, observation, and the quiet execution of truth. And in that, I found something far greater than revenge. I found myself. As I sit here now, thinking back on everything that happened, I realize how much this experience has changed me. Betrayal isn't something you just get over. It seeps into your thoughts. It lingers in the quiet moments. It shapes the way you see people, the way you see yourself. At first, I was consumed by anger, by a sense of injustice that felt unbearable. But over time, I learned that anger alone doesn't heal. It doesn't teach, and it certainly doesn't empower. It's patience, reflection, and deliberate action that shape true strength. I learned to pay attention, to observe without reacting, to understand before judging. I learned that people reveal themselves not just in their words, but in the small, unguarded moments, in the things they think are hidden. And I realized that betrayal is rarely about you. It's about the person who chose to act selfishly, thoughtlessly, and cruelly. It's their actions that define them, not your response. Your response defines you. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that I didn't stoop to the same level. I didn't attack, I didn't humiliate, I didn't spread gossip in return. I didn't let anger dictate my choices. I took control of myself, of my story, and of the way the truth would unfold. That is the kind of power that cannot be taken from you, no matter how deeply someone hurts you. It is a power that comes from clarity, from self-awareness, from the quiet confidence of knowing your own worth. And yet, even as I celebrate that, I cannot deny the sadness. Sadness for the person I trusted, for the moments that can never be reclaimed, for the innocence that was lost the moment betrayal entered the picture. But even that sadness has its purpose. It reminds me of how fragile trust can be, how precious genuine connection is, and how carefully we must guard our hearts while still allowing ourselves to love, to believe, to hope. I have also learned about timing. Revenge, or more accurately, justice, cannot be rushed. It is not about acting in haste, about lashing out in the moment. It is about understanding, calculating, and allowing the inevitable to unfold. There is beauty in precision, in letting truth surface in a way that cannot be denied. The moment she realized what had happened, the moment the weight of her choices hit her, it was not the shouting or drama that made it powerful. It was the undeniable clarity, the inevitability, the way her own actions came back to meet her, unmasked and undeniable. That moment taught me more about human nature than any argument ever could. I think about how this experience has reshaped my own perspective on trust. I am more careful now, yes, but I am not closed off. I have learned to discern, to observe, to recognize who is worthy of my confidence. I have learned that not everyone who smiles with you is your friend, but that doesn't mean friendship itself is meaningless. It means that the value of trust is measured not by how easily it is given, but by how carefully it is honored. And when it is betrayed, it teaches lessons we might otherwise never have learned. There is also freedom in the aftermath of betrayal. Freedom from anger, freedom from fear, freedom from the need to control others or manipulate outcomes. I learned that I cannot change her, cannot dictate her choices, cannot force her to be who I wish she had been. But I can change myself. I can choose my actions, my words, my attitude. I can rise above cruelty, deception, and manipulation. And in doing so, I reclaim not just my dignity, but my peace of mind. Looking back, I understand that the most profound victories are often silent. They do not require applause, recognition, or revenge in the traditional sense. They are victories of self-mastery, of patience, of integrity. They are the moments when you realize that you have taken something that was meant to weaken you and transformed it into a source of strength. That is a victory that no one can ever take from you, and it lasts far longer than the fleeting satisfaction of retaliation. I also learned that forgiveness is not always about letting someone off the hook. It is about freeing yourself from the weight of their actions. I may never fully forgive her, and perhaps that is not necessary. What matters is that I am no longer held captive by what she did. I am free to move forward, to live authentically, and to allow trust and friendship to grow where it belongs. The past has taught me, shaped me, and strengthened me, but it does not define the rest of my life. And so, as I close this chapter, I do so with a sense of calm and understanding. Betrayal hurt me deeply, but it also awakened me. It taught me the value of observation, patience, and precision. It revealed the limits of others and the depths of my own resilience. Most importantly, it showed me that my response, when measured, deliberate, and rooted in truth, can be more powerful than any act of revenge. Life does not hand us lessons neatly wrapped. It throws challenges, heartbreak, and betrayal in our path, and it is up to us to navigate them with wisdom and integrity. I have learned that even when someone tries to hurt you, the way you respond defines the outcome. And in that response, you discover who you truly are, stronger, wiser, and unshakable. I am no longer the same person who was betrayed. I am someone who has faced deceit, who has felt the sting of cruelty, who has learned the art of patience, and who has discovered the elegance of truth. And in that discovery, I have found something far greater than revenge. I have found myself, and that is the ultimate triumph.